Shall we bow our heads? Our gracious Father, again we thank you for your love, for your grace, for the hope that we have in Jesus. And we ask as we open your word that we would sense your presence and your Spirit, and that our hearts would be touched and that our lives would be changed by beholding Jesus, is our prayer in his name. Amen. If you hear the words Douglas MacArthur, I'm guessing there are a number of different things come to mind, but if there was one phrase that you thought of that he is known for, what would it be? I kind of thought that was safe, that we might be able to come up with that one. I shall return. You remember his story. He's there in the Philippines, and as the Japanese are beginning to come and take over, he is given orders that he must leave. Leaves by a PT boat rather than a submarine. I don't know why he chose that one over the other. But nonetheless, he gives the speech that he shall return. He makes a promise, and he keeps the promise. A promise made and a promise kept. Have you made promises in your life? Promises of things that you would do, things that you are going to return. I will return to. Maybe it wasn't a big deal. Maybe it was something simple. Maybe it was something very important. Someday I'm going to return home. Maybe that being hometown, maybe that being a special location, maybe meaning different things. Maybe you kind of look forward to returning to a high school reunion. You know, you've been successful, things have gone well, and you want everybody to know how well you've done. Maybe you were a little nervous about returning because things hadn't gone quite as well. Maybe there's some special favorite place, a vacation spot that you know you just long for the opportunity to go back and see again. Maybe a place that you've never been to, that you would like to go, that you would like to see. But I wonder, are you longing for Jesus to return? Is that your desire? Did you return to that place? Did you keep that promise? You know, someday I'm going to. Are you planning that you're going to keep that promise? You know, I haven't yet, but the day is coming and I will. Or have you forgotten about it? You know, it just kind of slipped my mind. I was going to, I meant it when I said it, but it didn't happen. You remember the story of David. As he is fleeing Jerusalem because his son is coming. He doesn't know if he will return or not. He doesn't make any promise like MacArthur that I shall return. Scripture records, then the king said to Zadok, carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling place. But if he says thus, I have no delight in you, here I am, let him do to me as seems good to him. Interesting attitude that David has about his return. When he leaves Jerusalem, he is uncertain. He doesn't know if he will return or not, but what is his attitude? What is his mindset as he's leaving? He accepts God's will for his life. That if God brings me back, that's fine. If he doesn't, my life is in his hands. I wonder, have you accepted God's will, God's plan for your life? God has a purpose. He has a plan for your life. Have you accepted it? Are you fighting against it? Are you struggling with it? Are you wrestling with it? Or have you accepted it? That whatever God opens up, whatever door, if he brings me back, if he doesn't, whatever he does, I will accept. Are you willing to accept his plan for your life? Then the story moves on. David is waiting. David is waiting because Absalom has died. That part of the story has ended. And yet David is still in exile. He has not returned to Jerusalem. He is waiting. What is David waiting for? It's really very simple. He's waiting to be invited to return. He's waiting for his brethren to invite him to come back to his throne. 2 Samuel chapter 19, starting with verse 9. Now all the people were in dispute throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivered us from the hand of the Philistines, and now he is fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, who we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king? So King David sent Zadok and Abiathar the priests, saying, speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king, to his very house? You are my brethren. You are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? God, do so to me, and more also, if you are not commander of the army before me continually in the place of Joab. So he swayed the hearts of all the men of Judah, just as the hearts of one man, so that they sent this word to the king, return, you and all your servants. Then the king returned and came to the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to escort the king across the Jordan. The son of David is also waiting. He is waiting to be invited back to his dwelling place in your life, in your heart, to return to your life if you have turned your back on him. If you've set up some other king and it hasn't worked out quite the way you thought it was going to, he is ready and willing to return. He is waiting for the invitation to save your life, to change your life, to come into your heart and life, and whatever it is that needs to be repaired, that needs to be fixed, he can change, he can restore. The question is, will you invite him into your heart, into your life? Are you willing to accept him no matter what you've done, no matter what your sin is? God is willing to come back into your life. God is willing to forgive. Are you willing to invite him back? David's return. What is the response when David returns? Well, everybody's happy, right? Well, not exactly. There are some issues. There are some that are happy, some that are not. There are a couple of instances in particular I want to look at first. 2 Samuel chapter 19, starting again with verse 15. Then the king returned and came to the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to go and meet the king, to escort the king across the Jordan. And then Shimei, the son of Gera, Benjamite, who was from Bahurim, hastened and came down to meet the men of Judah, to meet King David. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him, and they went over the Jordan before the king. Then a ferry boat went across to carry over the king's household and to do what he thought good. Now Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king when he had crossed the Jordan. Then he said to the king, do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king left Jerusalem, that the king should not take it to heart. Do you remember what he did when David left? He was pelting him with rocks and cursing him. Do not let my lord the king impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. Just kind of forget about that if you don't mind, Your Majesty. Just kind of pretend as if that didn't happen if you don't mind. You know, it wasn't my smartest day. It wasn't my best day. You know, do you mind just if we kind of let that go? For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. Therefore, here I am, the first today of all the house of Joseph, to go down to meet my lord the king. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? And David said, What do I have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should be adversaries to me today? Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? For do I not know that today I am king over Israel? Therefore the king said to Shimei, You shall not die. And the king swore to him. You know, it's always important as soon as possible to make things right. Now, there's probably a lot of issues and a lot of things we could talk about in this story about what's going on. And it's interesting if you go down in the story and you come to Solomon, one of David's last words to Solomon are to deal with this situation. And he does it. Now, I won't spoil the story. You can go and read it for yourself, how Solomon handles it. But nonetheless, David said, Today is a day to celebrate that I am king. There will be nobody put to death today. There is Shimei. There is another story that follows this one, another individual. Now, Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king. And he had not cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he returned in peace. So it was when he had come to Jerusalem to meet the king that the king said to him, Why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, My lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I will saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go to the king, because your servant is lame. Now, do you remember what the story was that came to David? Why Mephibosheth didn't come there? The servant tells David, well, he's kind of thinking that he's got a chance of becoming king. Now, I don't know if David bought the story or what, but you know, it's always good before we make decisions to hear both sides of the story. Even then, we may not have the whole picture, but you never have the picture when you only hear one side of the story. You at best have maybe half the truth. But since none of us are 100% honest, I'm guessing you don't even have half of it. But again, the story goes on. And he has slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is like the angel of God. Therefore do what is good in your eyes. For all my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Therefore, what right have I still to cry out any more to the king? So the king said to him, Why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said, You and Ziba divide the land. Then Mephibosheth said to the king, Rather let him take it all, inasmuch as my lord the king has come back in peace to his own house. Interesting. Two responses to David's return. There is Shimei, the one who has cursed David. There is Mephibosheth, who intended to go with David, but says, I was deceived by my servant, and being lame, I didn't have the opportunity, the ability to do it. Now I wonder, you know, the Bible doesn't tell us specifically, but what do you think was Shimei's concern, and what do you think was Mephibosheth's concern? Like I say, the Bible doesn't give us specific answers, but if I read the story, I don't think I'm getting too far out or reading too much into it to think that Shimei's first concern was what? To save his own skin. You know, he knew what he did. He acknowledged it was wrong, and we've got to give him credit. I have sinned against you. And you know, the sooner I confess and repent of my sin, the better it is. But I don't get any indication in the story that his primary concern is the honor of David. It's more, I blew it, I better make things right quick. And you know, that's not necessarily bad advice. If you mess things up, the sooner you straighten it out, probably the less problems you will have. But then there is Mephibosheth. His concern appears to be different, does it not? He has not washed. He has not trimmed himself. He hasn't taken care of himself. He's basically been in mourning from the time David left. His concern is that David is restored to the throne. His concern is for David's honor. He says, let Ziba have it all. I don't care as long as I'm in the presence of the king. You see, ultimately, as long as we're in the presence of the king, nothing else really matters. Two interesting responses to David's return. But the sad truth is, it's not the only response. There is some bickering that goes on. We're skipping a few verses about who was most active in inviting the king back and who was most responsive, and all sorts of, things that we argue about that really we shouldn't. It's going on here. In verse 1 of chapter 20, and there happened to be a rebel whose name was Sheba, the son of Barak, a Benjamite, and he blew the trumpet and said, we have no share in David, nor do we have inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man to his tent, O Israel. And you know what the tragedy is? That people listened. So the men of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, the son of Barak. But the men of Judah, from Jordan as far as Jerusalem, remained loyal to the king. Again, we have a divided kingdom. It's amazing how it doesn't take long for Satan to take those who are unified, those who have become one, and separate them. God's desire for you and I is that we are one with Him as He is one with His Father. I wonder, what is it that we're letting in our lives, in our relationships, that's causing us to be divided? To be divided in our loyalty, to be divided in our relationship with God. Are we trying to serve God and the world? It'd be nice to say it doesn't happen, but it does. It's something that happens in your life, and it happens in my life, and it's something that we have to be careful in dealing with. It happens here in the story of David, tragically. Sheba's response is to reject David. It is to rebel. It is to claim that he has no inheritance in David. Is he right? I suppose so, in one sense. Why does he have no inheritance in David? Well, because David has had enough and he decides, I'm going to separate the kingdom. I don't really want a united kingdom. Is that what the issue was? What was the issue? What is the problem? Why is it that he has no inheritance and some of the others have no inheritance in David? My friends, it's really very simple, because they choose not to. If you and I do not have an inheritance in the Son of David, it is because we choose not to. God's inheritance is big enough for each and every one of us to have a share. And if I do not have a share in the inheritance of the Son of David, it is because I choose not to accept what has been offered to me. I wonder, how many of us are like Sheba? What choices are you making today? Are you making choices that are setting you up down the road to reject the Son of David? To reject the inheritance, the offer that God gives to you and to me? Are we disowning our inheritance in our decisions by our activities? Now, the good news is, we don't do it all at once. The bad news is, if I continue on a path, there's going to come a point where I go so far that even God's Spirit and God's grace cannot reach me because it will not force. It is interesting. Acts chapter 1, a familiar passage we all know. Acts chapter 1, starting with verse 9. Now when he had spoken these things while they watched, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven, as he went up, behold, two men stood by them in white apparel, who also said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will so come in like manner as you saw him go into heaven. Jesus makes a promise. The Son of David has made a promise to you and I. It is that I will return. I will return in like manner. In the same way that you saw me go into heaven, I will come back. Now, I don't want to get too far off the path, but if anybody tells you that Jesus is coming different than he went into heaven, they're lying to you. Because the Bible is very clear. He will return the same way he went. And any other way that somebody says, well, he's going to do it this way or that, go back to the Bible. What does Jesus say? What do the angels tell the disciples? Not here in this particular passage, but when he returns, he also promises what? That my reward is with me to give everyone according to his works. When God comes, he is coming to give everyone the reward for the choice they have made. Those that have chosen to put their faith in him will receive the crown of life. Those who have chosen not to accept the inheritance that is available to them will receive the reward of their choice. Again, it is all about choice. How will you respond? Are you preparing to welcome him? Or are you preparing to reject him? You know, I know sometimes we like to minimize things, maybe sometimes even overstate them. But the reality is I need to remember that every choice, every decision I make is setting me up either to be prepared and ready for Jesus when he returns or to reject him. What choices are you making in your daily life, in your habits, and what we say and what we do? Are we looking forward to him to return? Sadly, the Son of David, Jesus on this earth, you know the response. John chapter 19, verse 15. There in Pilate's judgment hall, as the trial is going on, and Pilate asked them, what shall I do with your king? But they cried out, away with him, crucify him. Pilate said, shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, what? We have no king but Caesar. Now, you know, it's easy to point our finger at them and say, how could they? But what about in your life and mine? Am I in my day-to-day life really saying, I have no king but me? No, I wouldn't say Caesar. I might, well, you know, it's what I want to do. And I understand that feeling. I've wrestled with it. Matter of fact, I still wrestle with it. And I'm guessing that I will wrestle with it until the day this mortal puts on immortality. But wrestling with it and falling to it are two different things. But nonetheless, we wrestle with it. We wrestle with the things of the world, all the things Satan has to offer. You know, this will make you happy if you just go down this path or do this. You know, I know what this book says, but you know, you don't have to do that to be happy. And you know, for a little while, his lie works. You know, the Bible talks about Moses and the pleasures of sin for a season. There is a season that sin is fun. But then comes the harvest, where I have to reap what I sow. That's not much fun. We have no king but Caesar was the response. How are you responding to the Son of David, to Jesus? Is he welcome? Is He welcome in your heart? Is He welcome in your life? Or are you rejecting Him on a daily basis? Are you rejecting Him at different times in your life, in different experiences? Well, it's okay right now, Lord, but there's a couple of things that I want to do that I know You don't approve of, so I'm just going to enjoy them. It would be nice to say that we don't have those issues, but we do. I need to surrender everything to Him. Revelation chapter 6 talks about that day, starting with verse 14. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of Him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of His wrath has come, and who is able to stand? A simple question. Who is able to stand? It is the right question, my friends. The thing I want to ask you this morning is, do you have the right answer? Not just theoretically, not just intellectually. Do you have it in a practical sense in your life, in your relationship with Jesus? Revelation 7, verses 13 and 14. Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? And I said to him, Sir, you know. So he said to me, these are the ones who came out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in their own self-sufficiency, in their own determination, in their own... How did they make their robes white? By washing them in the blood of the Lamb. There is only one way that you will be able to stand and that I will be able to stand in that day. That is if I have washed my robe in the blood of the Lamb. Chapter 12, verse 11 puts it a little different. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to death. Do you love Jesus more than life itself? You see, ultimately, I've got to come to the point where I love Jesus more than anything else. I don't know anything in the Bible that tells us, but the impression I get in the little bit of that story with Mephibosheth is that he loved David more than life itself. He had seen the grace, the compassion of David that had been shown to him, and there was only one thing that mattered, and that was the honor of David. He would have given up everything for that. I wonder, have we noticed God's love and His grace as demonstrated on Calvary? Has it affected us to the point where there is nothing that we desire more than the honor of Jesus? Where there is nothing we love more than Him. There is nothing we desire more than to see Him and to be with Him. Isaiah chapter 25, verse 9. You know it, at least you know part of it. We say it every Sabbath. And it shall be said in that day, Lo, this is our God. We have waited for Him, and He will save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for Him. We will be glad and rejoice in His salvation. You see, ultimately, folks, there is the group that says, we will not have this man reign over us, and they're crying for the rocks and the mountains, because they chose to reject the inheritance, the offer that Jesus has given. And there are those who say, Lo, this is our God. We have waited for Him, and He will save us. The question this morning for you and for me, for each of us, is which group will you be in? Which choices are you making on a day-to-day basis? Do you want to be able to stand when Jesus returns? Are you washing your robe in the blood of the Lamb? Are you wearing the robe of His perfect righteousness? Would you like to accept that robe this morning? Would you like to accept His righteousness? Would you like to know that you will be ready when Jesus returns? The only way I can stand, the only way I will be ready is to accept Jesus, to accept His blood, to accept His robe, to accept His righteousness as my only hope. Is that your hope this morning? Would you like to make that your hope right here, right now? If that is your desire, I invite you to stand with me as we sing our hymn of dedication, We Have This Hope.